Well, hi there. Let's get the doors off of this enclosure because I want to show you this new enclosure from Zen Habitats. It's the best one yet. Well, I'm here today inside of the 4-foot by 4-foot by 2-foot PVC enclosure from Zen Habitats. This is the third enclosure that Zen Habitats has sent to us, and though I have really liked all three, I've got to say this one is the best one yet. And in fact, this is the first ever Zen Habitats enclosure about which I have absolutely zero complaints. I think they finally perfected this thing. And so I want to share all of the new pros. If you're not familiar with the Zen Habitats enclosures, we'll actually just create a whole playlist of the Zen Habitats builds that we've done before. Because the first one they ever sent us was their original 2-foot by 4-foot by 2-foot wood enclosure. The panels look just like this, but they're bamboo. They're really just compressed wood. And even before they sent that to us, I was like, have you ever considered making it out of PVC? And so then they sent us the next iteration, which was the PVC version of that enclosure, except they sent us the 4-foot by 2-foot by 18-inch tall enclosure, and it's rad. This one, though, is the monster. It is 4 feet tall, 4 feet long, 2 feet. It's the first one that is a comfortable Clint enclosure. I actually could probably furnish this quite nicely and spend some considerable time in here. Put a little TV there, small recliner. This could be a great place for Clint's. But I want to point out some of the things should you decide to use this for a reptile instead of for you. Okay, one thing that I love, so some major improvements. I'll start with what I think is the biggest thing of all. I love this. The doors do not come all the way to the bottom of the enclosure. There is a built-in layer here for substrate. They had kind of a good workaround on their previous enclosures for the fact that the doors went all the way to the bottom, but it was never quite perfect. I love this. And they actually give you a couple of options. If you want more ventilation, instead of putting this plexiglass in here, you can put a screen mesh just like on the top of this enclosure, which is actually a really heavy-duty, awesome screen mesh. You can put that in there. But if you're going to put substrate down below, this plexiglass is the way to go, and I love this. I love this. That was a huge improvement, Zen Habitats. Good on ya. There's several other things that I love. Another thing is, for the first time ever, there is track, or a place for the doors to slide into on the sides as well as the top and bottom. And this is really important. On the other ones, it was a flush, flat piece of metal there, which would allow a smart animal, like a monitor lizard, which happens to be what we're going to be putting in this enclosure, that would allow a smart animal like that to hook a nail over there and open the door. Gus, he's a tegu, he can do this. At monitor lizards, I've had them do this. And so you want it so that the doors go into something so they can't open the doors. That was a big improvement. Well done, Zen Habitats. The last thing, in addition to the fact that this too is PVC, so I love that, is there's this hole up here, and through that hole you can run wires. I've always liked that. That's a good feature. And they normally have a little thing that can fit in that hole that it allows the wires to go through it. But I think a clever lizard, like a monitor lizard, which is what we're going to be putting in here, I think they could go through that. That's actually why I decided not to put my Aki in a Zen Habitats enclosure, is because I was too worried he'd go out through that hole. Well, they sent us 2 different stoppers this time, and one of them is solid, and I really like that. So that solid stopper, it's going in there. Awesome. It's going to keep our monitor from escaping, because as you know, I had a horrible experience with this monitor escaping already once. On top of that, though, it's the normal awesome Zen Habitat stuff. They go together with no tools. Maybe a hammer. A hammer makes it easier, but you don't need any tools. The wire mesh lids, or the mesh tops, are fantastic. You can put any light up there. It's not going to melt through. On this one, they even included a huge piece of plexiglass so you can cover about 80% of that top if humidity is an issue for you. So this enclosure is an amazing upgrade over the other two. And so now I'm going to build this Zen Habitats enclosure, the best Zen Habitats enclosure ever, the potentially perfect Zen Habitats enclosure, into a stinking rad emerald tree monitor enclosure. If you watch our live streams on a regular basis, you are probably aware that our good friend, a rad fan from Patreon, Travis Falgren, and his family recently sent us a captive bred baby emerald tree monitor. This is possibly my favorite type of lizard. I love monitors and I love skinks, and I would have a very difficult time telling you a monitor that I think is cooler than the emerald tree monitor. When we did our video on emerald tree monitors before, I fell absolutely in love with them. But I didn't dream I would have one anytime soon. And Travis sent one to us. And when we knew that he was sending it to us, we built this enclosure. This enclosure is an Exoterra 18 by 36 by 24, and it is a beautiful enclosure. I have my emerald tree skinks in one of these enclosures. You've probably seen our enclosure build on those emerald tree skinks, and I love these enclosures. And for a very young emerald tree monitor, I think that enclosure would have been good. However, this monitor came and it was a little bit older than I thought, and so we need something bigger. Let's get to work, shall we? Hey, this is Clint from the future. All right, I still love this enclosure, but I did find one little flaw with it. It is, in most ways, the most perfect Zen Habitats enclosure ever, and I am so grateful to have it. But it's a brand new enclosure, and we were actually one of the first people to test it out, and we found one new problem, which is those doors are very, very tall, and they're made of plexiglass, and as a result, they flex, which means basically anything that could start to get its head through there is probably going to be able to push its way between the two doors. But we told Zen Habitats about this issue, which I remedied actually by putting some rare earth magnets in there. It also would be easy to fix it if you just replace the plexiglass with glass. But Zen Habitats is taking care of it, and they've created a big aluminum piece that is going to prevent that flex from being a problem. So when you go to get this enclosure, that piece will be included. You're not going to have the same problem I did. However, if for some reason you have one that doesn't have that piece, like you got a pre-order or something like that, I don't know, you could use the magnets, you could use glass, but beware that that flex can happen, and it's just the issue with having really tall plexiglass doors. And again, they fixed it because Zen Habitats is awesome, and they're listening, and they're trying to make a really, really good product. And that's why we keep on talking about them. They're not a sponsor of this channel, but they make a good product. You know, they're great. They're great, and they just seem to keep getting better. So anyway, back to your regular scheduled programming. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a false bottom in here using screen and lava rocks, just like we did in the last video. If you haven't seen that, go ahead and check that out, but we'll just do this real quick. The next step is I am going to make quite a mixture for our substrate in here. I'm going to be putting a lot of plants in here. We need to maintain some humidity, so I've actually got a whole lot of things that we're going to mix together and try to find a mixture that we like. Like always, we're experimenting a little bit. Okay, so I've got a number of ingredients to try out here. One of them is I have an enormous brick of eco earth. Okay. So that's definitely going to be part of it. I've got some topsoil. We may include some topsoil in this mix. I've got paver sand. We're almost certainly going to use some of that. I've got some organic potting soil. That should come in pretty handy. And I have this tiny little brick of peat moss. So I'm going to just start mixing this together until I feel like I get a really, really rich mixture. Okay, so I've actually already got a whole lot of eco-earth in this little tub here. And I'll just start adding ingredients. Okay, so here's a bunch of eco-earth. Breaking it up, just checking for anything like plastic or anything like that. It's every now and then turns up in these giant bricks. But it's looking pretty good. And so I think the first thing I'm going to add is a little paver sand. Get that nice and mixed up. Yeah, this is looking nice. I think next I'm going to go with a little of this potting soil. So this is organic potting soil. You definitely want to make sure it doesn't have fertilizer or anything like that in it. When you get potting soil, use my handy dandy Skeletool. You can see those little white flecks. It's got a little bit of perlite in it, which is good. Okay, a little potting soil in there. Eco-earth, sand, potting soil so far. Oh yeah. That's the good substrate. All right, let's get some of this peat moss in there. Oh yeah. We're getting a really fancy pants mixture now. These plants are going to like that. Smells scrumptious. All right, let's dump it in. Here we go. It's amazing when your enclosure is big enough that this whole bucket might not be enough. Yeah, we'll definitely make some more. This time I'm going to add a little of this topsoil, and I think more sphagnum and more sand and maybe a little more potting soil to our top level. Boy, perfect job to have a tie on for. Yep, that's messy. Okay. All right, now we get to do the fun part. So I have some enormous, awesome hardwood, I don't know if I should call them sticks or logs, but when you've got an enclosure this big, you need some big, big branches. And I've been excited. I haven't had an enclosure in which I could really use these until now. So this day's coming together. Check this out. Isn't this amazing? And being an arboreal monitor, our guy's going to make good use of this. We're not going to have a whole lot of options with what we can do with this, but I really like this. And as Master Yoda would say, there is another. Okay, let's see here. Kind of like that. Now, let's see, I have a few more sticks that we're going to put in place probably with zip ties. We're going to experiment with that. And then I've got some amazing plants. So I'm just going to move those around and just see where I think that they look the best. And then I'll put them in place permanently. I'll try to let you know what all these plants are as I get to them. I have always known this plant as a miniature umbrella tree. I guess it is called Schefflera arbicola is what this actually is. It's a pretty plant. That's what I know, and I've always liked them. So this is a big old heart-leafed philodendron. This one's a little bit variegated, and it's a hanging basket, which I originally wasn't planning to use it as a hanging plant, but all of these tanks, all of these Zen Habitats tanks have these metal bars that go across the top, and they actually make a spectacular place to hang a plant. And I kind of like the way this looks. This is a Bromeliad, and Bromeliads are really awesome plants. They do well in low lighting because they're from the understory of the rainforest, and they also do well with limited amounts of moisture, which is strange because they're from the rainforest. But the thing about them is they live up in the trees. So they will grow on the sides of trees, and they actually do cam photosynthesis, which is the type of photosynthesis that you get from cactus. So they live their lives in a very water efficient sort of a way because they're not sitting down in the wet soil. And actually they'll catch most of their moisture up in their leaves. And very small, like thumbnail dart frogs, a lot of times the way that they reproduce is they haul their tadpoles on their backs and drop them off in these little cups in the bromeliads. And then they will come and lay unfertilized eggs in with those tadpoles to feed them until they develop into little froglets. It's so stinking rad. I love bromeliads, and I've always loved these big bromeliads, but they're too big for most of the enclosures I build. Not for this one. Yeah, I'll zip tie it in the end. Right now I'm situating. Okay, so this fern is often called a kangaroo paw. I don't know the exact species on it because it didn't come with a label, but it's really cool. Ferns are very, very neat plants. They need it a little bit more moist than a lot of other plants because they have to reproduce into water. And so I'm going to put this guy down on the bottom somewhere. We'll play around with exactly where all these go, but I'll put him down here somewhere where he's got some room to expand. Kind of like him right there, actually. So this is a Dracaenadermensis. I've experimented with these before, and these do really well in my enclosures. One thing I do notice about this one is it's a medium light plant. I usually like low light plants. And so I'm going to put it over here so it's not shadowed by all of this stuff. So we're going to stick him right about there. Maybe a little bit in so that he doesn't get crowded by the wall. This is called a Plumosa Fern, and Michelle actually told me about these. Apparently, they do really, really well in terraria. Honestly, it looks like such a fragile plant that I've been avoiding them, but I'm really excited to see how this one does. It's such a neat little guy. It's going to add so much whimsy. Let's see. What do you think? This last plant is a ground cover plant. I'm not exactly sure which kind because it wasn't labeled. My success with ground cover plants has been hit and miss over time, but I'm going to put it in here and we'll update you on how it does. If you know what this is, by the way, please don't hesitate to comment and let us know. So let me find a spot here in the open. And I really think that's about all the space I have for plants. I've got another stick I want to situate up high, so I'm going to put that in with zip ties, and then we'll put these plants in permanently. So I've got this stinking red stick. It's got a lot of really cool moss and lichen growing on it, and I'm going to put it up here, and then I think I will just zip tie it in place so that the monitor can climb on that. All right. Let's pot the plants. So I've got a few different vine options here. I've got this Fluker's vine. I think this is an Exoterra or a Zoomed vine. And this was in a package, it's brand new, but I had to use it to recapture this monitor during the worst day ever. I've got this kind of fun vine, and then I've got a lot of moss also that I'm going to use here in a few spots to kind of spruce things up. I might put a little over here by this flower pot to further disguise it. I'm not a big fan of just flower pots in there, but sometimes you do what you have to do. There you go, buddy. It's not a perfect disguise, but it's a start. Throw a little bit, maybe down in here. A little happy moss. I like these vines. One thing I usually do, vines kind of grow in a coil, so I usually kind of wrap them up into a coil before I install them. And this again is a place where I think I can use the cool bars at the top to my advantage, because they're going to give me a place to mount these vines. Okay. All right, I'll take a step back and see how that looks. I'd like to pause for just a moment and give a special thanks to our patrons at Patreon who made this possible. Really, so much of this would not have been possible without your support and the support of Zen Habitats. So thank you all. For the record, this wasn't a paid advertisement for Zen Habitats in any way. They sent us the enclosure, but that's where it ends. I was free to tell you exactly what I thought of this enclosure, and this is the best one they've ever made. I loved it, and I'm so excited to have it on display here at Clint's Reptile Room. I have a huge hide in his other enclosure and his water bowl from his other enclosure. I'll move those in there right when I move him in, but I think this is really coming together. Probably back in that corner is where I'll put his hide, bring his water bowl up here. I'm trying to decide. I think I might put one more plant right there. I think we have just the spot for this guy. Oh yeah, that made all the difference. All right, at this point, I'm going to give everything a good thorough watering, and then I think it'll come time to introduce our little green tree monitor into his new enclosure. So with that, let's get him in here and see what he thinks. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon.
I have a shovel. Will that be helpful? If I go get it from the car?
How big is it?
Who just carries a shovel around their
It's
car?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Why do you have a shovel in your car?
Because he needs to bury a body.
That's what I was thinking.
You don't know me.
You don't know me.
Should I wait for the
Hey, Michelle. Can you tell us what's going through your mind right now?
No.
Please, Michelle.
What's going through your mind?
Pretty please, Michelle. Can you tell us what's going through your
I am
mind?
not.
Have you had to do this? Did it involve a long glove?
It looks very much like you're clearing out the rectum of a steer or something.
Yeah.
That's what I figured. And I hope you had a long glove. Hopefully you feel better now. Get that out of your system.